a powerful, gracious, principled campaigner as John. You know, when I first met Julian Assange almost 10 years ago, I asked him why he had started WikiLeaks. And he replied, "Transparency and accountability are moral issues that must be the essence of public life and journalism," unquote. Now, I'd never heard a publisher or an editor invoke morality in this way. Julian believes that journalists are the agents of people, not power. That we, the people, have the right to know about the darkest secrets of those who claim to act in our name. If the powerful lie to us, we have the right to know. If they say one thing in private and the opposite in public, we have the right to know. If they conspire against us, as Blair did over Iraq, and then pretend to be Democrats, we have the right to know. If this morality of purpose, it's this morality of purpose that so threatens the collusion of powers that want to plunge much of the world into war and now wants to bury Julian alive in Trump's fascist America. In 2008, a top-secret US State Department report described in detail how the United States would combat this new moral threat. A secretly directed personal smear campaign against Julian Assange would lead to, and I quote, exposure and criminal prosecution. The aim was to silence and criminalize WikiLeaks and its editor. Page after page revealed a war on a single human being and on the very principle of freedom of speech and freedom of thought and democracy. The imperial shock troops will be those who call themselves journalists, the big hitters of the so-called mainstream, especially the liberals who mark the perimeters of dissent. And that's what happened. I've been a reporter for more than 50 years, and I've never known a smear campaign like this one. The fabricated character assassination of a man who refused to join the club, who believed journalism was a service to the public, never to those above. Julian shamed his persecutors. He produced scoop after scoop. He exposed the fraudulence of wars promoted by the media and the homicidal nature of those wars, the corruption of dictators, the evils of Guantanamo. He forced us in the West to look in the mirror. He exposed the official truth-tellers in the media, so-called, as collaborators. Those I would call Vichy journalists. None of these imposters believed Julian when he warned that his life was in danger, that Sweden was a setup, and he was right, and he was repeatedly right. The extradition hearing here this week is the final act of the campaign to bury Julian Assange. It's not due process, it's due revenge. The American indictment is clearly rigged, a demonstrable sham. So far the hearings have been reminiscent of their Stalinist equivalents during the Cold War. Today the land that gave us the Magna Carta is distinguished by the abandonment of its own sovereignty in allowing a malign foreign power to manipulate justice, and by the vicious psychological torture of Julian. A form of torture, as Niels Melzer, the UN expert, has pointed out, that was refined by the Nazis because it was more effective in breaking its victims. Every time I've visited Julian in Belmarsh prison, I've seen the effects of this torture. When I last saw him, he'd lost more than 10 kilos in weight. Incredibly, his wicked sense of humour was still intact. As for Julian's homeland, Australia, Australia has displayed only a cringing cowardice as it has secretly colluded with a lawless power against its own citizen who ought to be celebrated as a national hero. It's said that whatever happens to Julian in the coming weeks will diminish freedom of the press. But which press? The Guardian, the BBC, the New York Times, the Jeff Bezos Washington Post? No, the journalists in these organisations can breathe freely. The Judases on the Guardian who flirted with Julian, exploited his landmark work, made their pile, then betrayed him, have nothing whatsoever to fear. They are safe because they are needed. Freedom of the press now rests with the honourable few, the exceptions, the dissidents on the internet who belong to no club, who are neither rich nor laden with Pulitzer Prizes, but produce fine, disobedient, moral journalism, those like Julian Assange. Meanwhile, it's our responsibility to stand by a true journalist whose sheer courage ought to be inspiration to all of us who believe that freedom is still a possibility. I salute him. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you for that. It's vitally important.